Hello, we are Amelia and Tanya from Coffee Catchup's podcast. This is Coffee Catchup's Espresso on Cross Rhythms Radio. Mm-hmm. And today we are talking about loneliness.
Yeah, I know. It feels weird to talk about it, doesn't it?
Yes, it
feels like the subject that no one talks about, which is ironic.
Yes, very ironic,
the subject feels a little lonely in itself. I don't know about you, but I think loneliness has a level of shame attached to it.
So true.
So true. I don't want to admit I'm lonely because it's kind of a loser thing to admit.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like, isn't it?
It's like, look how lame I am not having any friends, because that's what it feels like you're saying when you're lonely.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
But in true Tanya style, I've got some facts and statistics.
She's back.
I'm back.
The stats lady is
I'm
back. Let's go.
Thank you. Google has been good to me. So 45% of adults feel lonely often. That's in the UK. Mm-hmm. So that is almost half of us are feeling lonely at this given moment often. And I'm sure there was another study on that, like more like 90% of us have said we feel lonely at some point in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's people who are willing to admit it, because there's a level of not really wanting to admit it as well.
Yeah, so true. So true.
And interestingly, more than 60% of people who reported being lonely were married.
Ooh, that is interesting, actually.
It is an interesting fact. So that one, I think, is a helpful fact to show you that loneliness isn't just the simple act of being alone. Loneliness isn't about, I spend a lot of time on my own, because sometimes you can meet some of the happiest people that have spent a lot of time on their own.
Yeah.
It is not about that. Loneliness is so much more complicated than whether you have friends or not, or whether you are in a relationship or not. So that can be quite helpful to understand what it actually is. Loneliness is really dangerous. Loneliness has physical side effects. Chronic loneliness significantly increases our risk of cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. Loneliness is as dangerous as being a chain smoker. It says as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, so those are kind of things that show you facts and figures. I've got more as well in a bit, but just how important this topic is, and the fact that we don't talk about it very much.
No, we don't.
Is worrying. I have a question for you.
Go for it.
Of all the age groups, which age group do you think experiences the most loneliness?
Oh, see, I've got quite a good track record of guessing.
Yeah, Amelia's got these right.
Haven't I? But I'm gonna guess and say elderly people.
I would have guessed the same thing. But this is, my stats surprised me.
Oh, have I broken my track record?
You have broken your track record. You've got it wrong.
That's so disappointing.
Because 16 to 29-year-olds are twice as likely to feel lonely as anyone over 70.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, because you have this picture, don't you, of an usually an elderly person, an elderly lady, for example, sat in a house all alone. That's your picture of loneliness. Yeah. But that is not the reality all the time. It can be, but it isn't for a lot of the time.
That's really, really interesting. And actually, I've got a stat for you on that. I mean, I didn't know that answer, but funny enough, the stat that I've got for you is 62% of lonely young people say that feeling lonely makes them lose confidence in themselves, which is huge.
Yeah, it's
isn't
sad.
It?
Yeah.
Really, really sad. And I think it's really interesting to think about loneliness and the link that it has to mental health. And obviously we do have a mental health crisis essentially amongst young people, don't we? But the fact that loneliness and that isolation can lead to such a lacking confidence.
Yeah, there's interesting, when you look at what loneliness is, there's different types. There's emotional loneliness. So the absence of a meaningful relationship. You could have loads of relationships. You could be the most popular person. And I actually think this is what celebrities often experience. Because you often you look at these really, really famous and rich people and you think, they must have it all. They must be so happy. But actually, some of them are really lonely because they may have many, many friends, but they might be missing that absence of a meaningful emotional relationship because everybody's after their money or their connections or whatever. Then there's social loneliness, which is a perceived deficit in quality of social connections. So that, again, it's about quality, it's not about quantity. And then there's an existential loneliness. So that is people who feel fundamentally separate from other people.
Yeah.
And then there's also situational loneliness, which can be of a situation. And we were actually talking about this earlier today. Christmas is one.
Yes.
Christmas is a situational thing. A lot of people feel lonely in that situation. A lot of people feel lonely in specific moments, maybe bank holiday or a Sunday where you're supposed to be with your family, things like that. So this is big, and this affects, it affects me for sure, and I think it affects most people.
Yeah, so true, so true. I mean, there's loads we could talk about here. We are going to take a quick break for a song, but we'll be back very soon. So, welcome back to Coffee Catchup Espresso. We've been talking about loneliness.
We have. I've got one more fact, which I think is really interesting, and it makes me sound a bit mercenary. But for me, when I read the fact, it made me think, loneliness isn't just the problem of the person that's lonely. Ooh. It is for everyone. Because if we have more community, less loneliness, then we are going to have a better society, not just for people's mental well-being, but weirdly, for your bank account as well. And I'm going to tell you for why with this stat, which it says, it has been estimated that loneliness costs UK employers £2.5 billion a year.
Oh my goodness, that's a crazy high number.
But why? But for why? Why does loneliness impact on how much employers make? It's because if you're lonely, you take more sick days. Mm-hmm. If you're lonely, you have less productivity. You will take up less of the overtime that needs to be done. And also staff turnover is more. And all of these things are bad for business. So loneliness is also bad for our economy.
Oh my goodness. Wow. We'd like to clarify here, we're not bashing lonely people.
I
don't feel bad about that. But that is a crazy statistic, isn't it?
It's a crazy statistic because it just shows you that this is all of our problems. Most people experience loneliness. And what are we going to do about it, How can we help?
That's a great question. That is a great question. I think if we start off with, how we kind of can help ourselves. Yeah. I think positive affirmations can actually have a lot of power. We talk about words a lot on the podcast, and actually speaking over yourself things about having value, because you do. There's some great things to be found in the Bible in terms of positive affirmations that you can speak over yourself. I have worth, I am loved, and so many more that are really, really good. But also maybe proactiveness. If you are feeling really lonely, reach out to somebody, because that can really, really help. They say a problem shared is a problem halved, and it can really help even just to talk about it with either with a friend, with a family member, or your partner, or with a professional. There's absolutely no shame in getting professional help at all. Have you got anything for us, Tanya?
Yeah, I do actually. Loneliness is something that I have struggled with many times. And admitting you're lonely is really hard. We talked about it earlier, is that it feels like I shouldn't be lonely, especially in my 20s. I'm in my 20s, soon to be 30. We won't talk about it. It feels like if I say I'm lonely, that's almost wrong. That because I'm in my 20s and I should be living my best life, they're the best years of your life, so they say, that there's something wrong with me. And actually talking to people about it is really important because people don't know. They just think you're okay. Yeah. And people don't know that you're struggling, that you're lonely. So ask the people that you do know who care. And even if you can't think of anyone, then you can call up a phone line. The Samaritans are great if you're feeling lonely. And, there are people around. And one of the things that we've talked about on the podcast sometimes And we actually talk about this in relation to singleness, but I think it goes into this as well. That the opposite of loneliness isn't being in a relationship. It isn't marriage. It isn't how many friends you have. The opposite of loneliness is belonging. And we need somewhere to belong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the best places that I find belonging in is in community. It's not just relying on one person to meet all of your needs. And because that can be the mistake we often make when we enter into romantic relationships. This person's going to meet all my needs, or even a best buddy. Like if I was like, oh, Amelia's my best mate, she's going to meet all of my needs. You will fail at that, as good as you are and as amazing friend as you are.
It's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
I'd like to take that off myself.
I was using it as an example.
No, I know.
But community, where we're involved with multiple people, and something about Western society today has lost a little bit of its community.
Yes, so true.
So that, for me, is the answer. How we find community can be a little bit tricky. I'm sure there might be people listening, yeah, that sounds great, but how do we kind of get that?
Yes, that's a great question, and one that we will answer right after this song. Hello, welcome back to Coffee Catchup Espresso. We've been having a chat about loneliness, which sounds like a very depressing topic, and it is very sad in many ways, but we've actually had a very good chat.
Yeah.
And the question that Tanya very wisely asked before we went to the last song, what was your question?
Is how can we get community and feel like a sense of belonging?
Yes.
Really big question.
Really
We're going
big
to try and
question.
answer it in 5 minutes.
No pressure. Yeah, that is a great question. I think, put yourself into community. It sounds very simple, and I know it's not always that easy, but find a group that you are interested in. If you like running, there might be a running group. If you like crafts, there are always craft groups around. And do you know what? We've said before, we're both Christians. Church is a really great community. I found so much wonderful community.
I also found
church.
a statistic on that. When I was looking into loneliness, they said they did a section on religion, and this is a secular study saying that people who have regular religious community groups are 70% less likely to be lonely.
So interesting. So I didn't know that.
And I didn't know that either, but it doesn't surprise me because in an ideal world, Christian community, in my experience, has been one of people actually outwardly looking after the next person.
Yes.
And that's what it should be. It's not always that, but that's what it should be. But also sometimes, how can you be the person you want for someone else?
Yeah, that's a great question with this.
It's like, if you're struggling with loneliness, then almost be the person for someone else that you would want for you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do when you're sort of stuck in it. But helping someone else and giving to someone else often creates a ripple effect of that. And that's what we can see in some communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important as well. If you're noticing that somebody is feeling lonely, or if they come out and tell you, hey, I'm feeling really lonely right now. I think the first thing to say is don't be offended by that, because it's not a personal, I feel lonely and you're not being a good enough friend most of the time.
Yeah.
But also actually going, okay, like asking them and letting them take agency of the solution, in a way of saying, can I help you? How can I be of help to you? Put out that invitation to let them come around for dinner, or go for a walk with them somewhere, or meet them for coffee, or just doing something together that is going to help them feel less lonely. But I think letting them to an extent, unless you either know them very well and know what they would like, or something else is maybe not appropriate to ask them, but just kind of saying, hey, like, I would love to help you feel less lonely.
Yeah.
How can I help you with that? I want to be there for you. And letting them take agency of the response.
And I think there's things that we can all do, because this isn't just an individual problem, this is a community problem, you know. We can do things like notice the person in the group who no one's talking to. and go and sit with them and talk to them. Even your small interactions, like my grandma, bless her, she has got a lot less mobility than she used to have, and she can only get out of the house every so often. So the conversation she has with someone at the checkout in the supermarket means the world to her. So when we as an individual go, well, even in this small moment, I will show compassion and I will care, and I won't just hurriedly rush over this person's experience, can make or break it. Even a smile to a stranger on a street. All the things that we can do. What can you do today to make the community that you live in a better space, to bring light, to bring joy to the people around you? Because ultimately, I think as well, community and love will combat loneliness. There is so much more in this topic, but we have run out of time. We are going to do a longer podcast. I'm trying to make myself say podcast rather than just pod, on this topic, where we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to talk about it more. So yeah, if you want to listen to Coffee Catch-Ups, we do talk about this and more topics on our lovely list of episodes. So do go and find us on social media and listen on all of your regular streaming platforms. This has been Coffee Catch-Ups Espresso with Amelia and Tanya. Tune in next week for more. Bye-bye.